Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Hope you had a good weekend. My guest today is Clay Hutmacher. And if we had met each other while we were both still serving, I would be calling him Sir because he was a general in the Army. We're talking rarefied air at this point. His background, the U.S. Army Special Operations Aviation. Now, and actually, before I go into that, he was in the military for 40 years, which is an insane amount of time, in my opinion. So, Army Special Operations Aviator. What does that mean? I'm talking about TF-160th, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, also known as the Night Stalkers. And he, started off enlisted, of course, because he's a good officer, and in the Marine Corps. Started in the Marines, went into the Army Aviation, worked himself all the way up to a 2-star general, which I struggle to even understand what that would be like. And right now that he's out of the military, he's the president and CEO of the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. He does a great job of talking about his background and the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. So I will now shut my mouth and let you enjoy episode 224 with Mr. Clay Hutmacher.
Okay, I got the red smoke. Gun run, north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
How did you do 40 years in the military? First off, did you get out by your own choice, or did they say, hey, you're out of here?
Yeah, like all our buildings are not ADA compliant and we need to get rid of you.
How long can you actually serve in the military? Is there a hard out time age-wise?
There is. I think it's either 62 or 65.
So let's say, this is going to test my math. If you join when you're 18, you could do 40, would put you at 58 plus another. You could do 47 years.
Right.
Man. You would not be prepared for life outside the military if you did that.
No, I mean, I'd be sitting in my front porch and I don't know, with a colostomy bag and I don't know my first name. No, it was a very circuitous path for me, right? So I joined, I was 17. I was a high school dropout and I was with the Foster family and he was a Marine in Korea, was an engineer guy.
Yeah.
I just knew, hey, I needed a swift kick in the ass, and Marines seemed like I was actually going to join the Navy. They were like, oh, yeah, you could be a bosun's mate. That's a really great job.
No.
Of course, I'm 17.
No.
I don't know, And then they said, you probably ought to do the Marines. So I did that. I was an amphibious assault vehicle crewman, Amtracker guy. Did a couple floats, did a couple tours in Okinawa. And then I got re-enlisted, went to Whidbey Island as a Marine barracks guy. Security guard, and then got picked up for Army. Well, I was a bouncer, and the Marines, when you're on a Navy base, they have their own enlisted club.
Yes, they do.
Right.
Yes.
So ours was called the Globe and Anchor, and I was a bouncer in there.
An active duty bouncer.
That's right. Hey, that was like an extra $20 a week. That was like a major cha-ching for me.
And
back
what
then.
could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It was a bunch of aviation squids in there. How could we not handle them? So anyway, it wasn't like there was a SEAL platoon on the base.
Oh God, my first deployment was actually to Okinawa.
Oh, it was?
And it was pre 9/11. So
where were you at on Okinawa? You remember?
Kadena Air Force Base.
So you guys went over there were you working with like 1-1 or something?
We weren't really tasked with working with anybody in particular. We hit Australia.
Oh, nice.
We hit a little bit of Guam. We did Malaysia. We did the Philippines. We did Thailand, but all just to go train. The pre 9/11 SEAL community was vastly different. I don't know how much different it was for. I'm sure the operational tempo changed on the aviation side.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the structure, the training, the deployment cycles, it changed everything post 9/11 because my first deployment was amazing. 6 months in Kadena, where I would work out and eat until I was tired, sleep until I was hungry, wake up, work out again. There was copious amounts of alcohol involved in all phases of this as well. And it was amazing. It was everything I thought it could be.
What was that street out of Kadena? It was like a famous street. It was You know what I'm talking about, right?
I know what you're talking about, but I'm terrible with names. And
I
stuff.
can't remember it either. But I was up north at Camp Schwab.
Oh, okay.
Which was not like Kadena.
We actually went up there a few times, and I believe we dove off into the jungle a little bit.
Yeah, probably NTA, Northern Training Area up there. Yeah. So anyway, I joined the Marines, and I was walking through the club when I was a bouncer, and this another Marine, there was a Marine Reserve Huey Squadron there at the time, and he had this pamphlet. This guy had this pamphlet sitting on a table, or brochure, with a cobra hovering over the trees with the mist coming up, and I was like, hey, what's the deal with that? And it was the Army Warrant Officer Flight Program.
Yeah. So
I went down to Fort Lewis, now JBLM, Joint Base Lewis McChord. Took my flight physical down there, took all the flight aptitude tests I had to take.
Still as a Marine?
As a Marine, yeah.
What rank were you enlisted?
I was a sergeant. I was an E5, and I was on the E6 list when I transferred over.
Okay.
So the way that the DOD, Department of Defense reg works is you can go from enlisted to officer on an inter-service transfer. You can't, and you can go from officer to officer. You can't go from enlisted to enlisted.
Really?
Yeah. And I think it's more from a DOD perspective is, hey, we may lose an enlisted Marine NCO, but we gain an officer, in the aggregate.
That makes sense. But I mean, also, there might be some benefit to being able to swap one for one. It's interesting that they limit that.
Well, you can get out and do it, but there's an actual DOD regulation on it. So I came back from Okinawa on my second tour, went to Pendleton to the separation center. They picked me up, Army recruiter guy picked me up, and you have to be out and in within 24 hours to get no broken time. So they drove me down
I love the military.
Yeah, they drove me down to the MEP station in San Diego, and I got a quick physical, and I spent the night in some hotel room with I'm sure you remember this, with some kid going in the Air Force who was 18.
Questioning his life decisions.
Right,
asking you questions about the military boot
it's
camp.
Like, oh, no, it's all good, bro. Yeah. It's all good. You're good. So
Great choice. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. Full of surprises.
As if the military couldn't just do a paperwork shuffle. Like, why do you have to do all this crap? The MEPs, the getting out. It's like, come on.
It's like a cloud. You can't, you can't get your handle on anything. But then I went to flight school, and I was a warrant, went to the 101st, flew Blackhawks for them. Did
they, question for you about your aviation. So I have about 3,500 flight hours as well.
Oh, no kidding.
All fixed wing though. But I'm fascinated by a rotary wing. I've had 2 not very soft and particularly controlled landings in helicopters, so I'm not a huge fan.
That wouldn't have been with my alma mater, would it?
It might have been. Neither of them necessarily their fault. One was a massive amount of lead ingestion into the flight control systems.
That could put things on it. Controllability is a little difficult.
And, little birds can get into tight places, and sometimes things clip things. Yes.
Oh, was this this wasn't over the water?
It wasn't over the water, even though
the one I'm talking about.
It came off the end of the fast rope?
No, well, this is the one where they clipped the side of the ship, and they came in, and a SEAL dove in and saved the co-pilot's life because I think he broke his back.
Yes. I wasn't there for that. I heard about that. I was there, however, on the boat element where I wonder how open source are the TTPs for?
Not much.
So let's just say that sometimes we come from the sea and sometimes we come from the air.
I am 100% tracking.
And it's always a good idea to maybe, from a tactical perspective, come from different areas. So let's just say that maybe they wanted to get an elevated position that juts off the side of the vessel, and they were going to fast rope down. Sometimes, and this is why I'm fascinated about the helicopter process, sometimes holding station can be difficult. And there was
especially in Little Bird. This is Little Bird.
It was, it was MH-6.
Yeah.
And I kind of watched the Little Bird peel off with the fast rope still attached, and I remember thinking, there appears to be a man at the bottom of that.
Yes. Therein lies the problem. Yeah.
And as it peeled off, and then you're like, oh God, that dude did full arm extension at the end of that, and then.
So did they not know he was? Because
I think they had just lost station, and I don't know because I don't know what they can feel.
So he must have fell off, right?
He fell off the rope, but the
How
rope.
How high was he?
Tough to tell. It was nighttime, so I'd say 50, survivable for sure. I mean, he ended up.
Yeah, not good.
We put him on the HSAC, drove him in. I won't use his name, but he had already been Swiss cheesed overseas one time before. Swear to God, if you're anywhere near this dude, you're definitely going to get fucked up. Because it's like, I'm like, that guy, that's the dude who ended up, it's like, come on.
He's like a magnet.
For sure. But yeah, those particular helicopters are
well, there's,
unbelievable.
I've obviously flown MH-6s. I'm not and those guys are really good, but you get a lot of, so it depends on which way the relative wind's coming off the ship. They generate their own velocity going forward and their own wind, but there's a burble around the superstructure on the ship. And
I'd imagine.
Else. Yeah, so it gets, and then the other thing that happens with those is if guys are doing a climb through, right, going from one side, climbing through the back there.
Nothing would ever get hung up, of course.
Right, and the center of gravity shifts.
Yeah.
So you're like baking a cake up there trying to keep the thing.
I'm not going to lie. I've spent a lot of time. I used to love riding in the front right of Little Birds. It's just the optimal place because, at 1 minute out, you're swinging around and you're ready to rock and roll and the view is the best. But I would look over and just like you're saying, baking a cake, or when they would hover, like the helicopter was completely stable. The amount of flight control input that those guys were rapidly putting in there blew my mind.
Yeah.
I'm like, I would definitely crash this thing right now. This thing is rock solid and you're up there and I'm just like, get me off of this platform.
Yeah, it is and there's no assistance in the flight controls, and
those
in
are just
Blackhawk,
all raw
it's
controls?
all push-pull tubes.
Wow.
If I remember right, and I'm sure a warrant will correct me on this, but I think there's 50 cc's of hydraulic fluid, and it's mainly to damp out feedback from the rotor system and the controls. That's it, not to assist.
Wow.
In any way.
And just so we don't lose people. So if you want to see the helicopter we're talking about, you can look up an MH-6.
Correct.
Or you could watch, probably the first 10 minutes of Black Hawk Down because they're flying over the ocean. It's basically the same bird, right?
It's the same bird. Yeah, the AH and the MA, the attack version and the assault version are basically the same. The aircraft, one carries guns, rockets, the other one carries people. Usually one carrying people, those guys are more not as well behaved.
Yeah. Or for you older folks, Magnum PI.
Yes. I use that same reference. They're like, a little bird? What's a little bird? I said, well.
I think his was red.
It was. In fact, I met a guy that actually owned that bird later in life, because they'll sell it.
Of course.
Yeah, they cross-decked it to somebody else. But yeah, he said it had the same paint job and everything. Flying over the water in Hawaii.
I mean, in board shorts that are questionably too short. You can see a lot more than I signed up for.
Yes. They're almost like the tan UDTs.
I've spent far too much time in my life trying to figure out why they issued us and made us wear UDTs.
Yeah, I wore those things. They were horrible.
They are horrible, and that's another good Google for people. Actually, you could probably find a picture of Magnum PI wearing those if you just want to stay down the Magnum PI rabbit hole, because he was a former SEAL in the made-up world.
Yes, he was.
But I guess I can see it from a true underwater demolition team. Like maybe if that was your core competency, maybe in the 40s. Yeah. But when I went through BUDS in 97, why are we wearing those?
Yes.
I flip back and forth between some E9 somewhere was like, fuck you guys. This is what we're going to do.
That's right.
Or they had purchased so many of them that they were just trying to work their way through the stores that they already had.
Well, it's like the Ranger Sophie shorts, the Ranger
panties.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Same thing. You'd see those guys like, really, that's the best we can do?
Yeah.
And those are made in Fayetteville. The factory is, I drove by it one day. They're in Fayetteville.
Yeah. I don't know why we do the things. Okay. Aviation. So you go to flight school. Did they start you guys off on fixed wing or straight to rotor?
Straight to rotor.
Because I believe in the Navy,
you go to fixed wing, and Air Force too. I mean, I think there is a rotor track, but all naval aviators start fixed wing, and then they sort of get to that fork in the road, and they go.
Do you think that there's a benefit to doing that? I feel like flying an airplane is easier than a helicopter, so maybe you'd learn like the airspace stuff and all those rules of the road, if you will.
Maybe. I would say it's not necessarily bad. Plus, the other thing is for the Navy, if they want to transition a guy out of helicopters for some reason, if they have a shortage, now they have the foundational experience in flight school and a fixed wing rating, right? Where for a helicopter guy, you start at ground zero. I mean, you haven't ever flown a fixed wing.
It just seems like, especially with you have with the tail rotor and all the things that can just, again, if people want to go entertain themselves, get onto YouTube and put in tail rotor strike or tail rotor failure. It's not awesome. But you're dealing with all of that with an airplane. even when they do engine out drills, like when
you got time to make a decision.
It's like, oh, pitch for best glide.
Yeah. Break out a cigarette.
That hasn't been my experience with helicopters falling out
when
of the sky.
Big fan stops, things are really, really bad. No, I agree with you. I mean, there's things you have to do immediately. You know, roll throttles off, get the torque off. You know, when Mike Durant, who's a good friend of mine, when he crashed.
And he was in a MH, correct? Or
he was at 60.
Okay, he was in a 60, which is a Black Hawk.
He said he was, he got his tail rotor shot off with a RPG. And he said he was spinning, he was spinning so fast that, and all he could see was like a brown and blue line.
Wow.
And the centrifugal force was so heavy they couldn't reach up and get both of the throttles off. We call them PCLs, power control levers. He got one back to idle, and the other one he couldn't get out of the detent.
Is that the only hope that you have if you lose the tail rotor?
You've got to get the power off the main engine. So if you lose a tail rotor, now in a Little Bird it's a little different. As long as you got forward airspeed, you can fly it. In a Black Hawk, if you remember, the Black Hawk's tail rotor is sort of canted.
Yeah.
Right, so there's a lift vector. So that's canted because it produces 2.5% of the lift of a Black Hawk comes from the tail rotor. But the downside of that is when you lose it, you can't control it. It used to be like, fly. You can sort of follow the spin around a little bit to buy yourself a couple extra seconds, but you got to pull those power control levers off ASAP.
Because otherwise you're spinning without an anchor to hold you in place, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what happened. When the Chinook was shot down on Extortion 1-7, I did the investigation on that. I mean, they hit one of the aft rotor blades, took off 10 feet of it, and the airplane disintegrated within 5 seconds.
So, and I'm fascinated to hear the results of that because that was actually my old troop and my old squadron. I knew almost every single person on there. So the RPG, I was under the impression, and I don't know where I heard this, that it actually entered the aft of the helicraft and hit the, I don't know, what's the root base of the propellers? The
rotor head.
The rotor head. I was under the impression that it had hit that.
So no, so maybe whoever told you that might have been confused with
There's
the
a
Red
good
Wings.
chance I also made it up. For clarity.
Okay. Well, I don't want to disrupt a really good war story. I mean, especially if you've already shared it.
And that one was a catastrophe. And you know what? It probably was my own confusion with Red Wings because I believe that one did go
up in the ramp. And actually, I think all went up. I don't know where it impacted, but it took out that entire bird.
There's nothing good it's going to hit on the inside of that.
No. And we had 8 1/60th on there, and you had 8 SEALs on there, and they were all killed. But on the Extortion 1-7 bird, they fired 2 RPGs. The first one passed below it. The second one hit at one of the aft rotor blades. Actually, as the rotor blade was advancing away from it, it came up from the trailing edge, blew through the forward edge, took off 10 feet 2 inches of that blade. So now the aft and forward and aft rotor systems are not synced. So the rotor blades then intermesh.
Collided. Oh, boy.
And the Chinook's in 3 big pieces, right? So you've got the tube in the middle, the cabin, and then that front door, that door on the right front.
Forward right.
That's a transition piece where that's the forward piece, and that covers the transmission, the cockpit. And then the aft piece is where the aft pylon is and the ramp and all of that in the aft window. So once you hit that aft rotor blade, those blades intermesh, the aft portion snapped off. Now you have no counter torque. Yeah. And it starts a violent spin and pitches up. The front portion comes off, and then the tube, the cabin, the centerpiece, hits in that creek bed, if you remember that, hit in that creek bed.
How high off the ground were they when they had that strike?
They didn't have a data thing, but I would say between 100 and 140 feet. They were inside of a kilometer out from their HLZ.
Do you think anybody survived the fall?
No, nobody. The autopsy, by my recollection, indicated they were all dead before they hit the ground.
Yeah, I had talked to a few guys. Obviously, the names, there was a large list of names, and it came out over a course of a couple of days. But as soon as I saw the first name, I knew who it was. Right, yeah. Meaning not obviously that first name, but who, meaning not only the command, but the element inside of the command. And I had talked to some people who had basically watched it happen over ISR feed, and because then it started on fire afterwards.
It burnt post crash. Yeah. So there, magnesium. The aircraft are made out of magnesium. Once magnesium starts burning, it's almost like a white phosphorus grenade. I mean, you got to like put mud on it, to get it to go out, and it doesn't really go out. It just smolders.
I was surprised they were able to actually do autopsies, to be honest with you.
Well, I think most of the people were thrown clear. The last guys that loaded on that were Afghans, and a standard thing. They load them last, and they got ejected, most of them.
Oh, that's right, because you said the tail portion came off.
Right, and I think, if I remember right, the totals were 22 Navy, 17 of those were SEALs, the rest were enablers, support folks, and then
air crew.
5 Army, because that wasn't a 160th bird, that was a reserve bird, and then 3 Air Force, 2 PJs and a CCT guy.
Yeah, no, it was catastrophic.
Oh, it was horrible. And I just got out of I'd finished up command of the 160th, and I just came out of the War College, and they said, hey, you need to go over there. So I flew over there to Afghanistan with the team, and we did all the investigations on it. And then I participated in the outbriefs. I did the Air Force folks. They did the Navy and the Army in a mass briefing center somewhere in Little Creek area. Where
do you even start on something like that?
Well, it's actually, they just go through the whole process. This is what happened, in full transparency with the family. I understand some of them, there was
the investigation. Where do you even begin?
That's a good question. So the good thing is we had ISR.
Yeah.
And
we had people listening, that's think of it as a Predator feed or a Reaper feed, or
correct. That's a great analogy.
CCTV, closed circuit television, is largely what it looks like. Oftentimes,
so we saw that. The Rangers were on the ground nearby. They and by the way, my hats off to the Rangers there. They really did a great job on the sort of the consequence management after the fact, recovering our folks, and then also recovering the airplane to deny the enemy any kind of propaganda victory.
Yeah, it was bad enough.
It was, and. So we had there, they took a lot of pictures. We had that. You can see from the feeds, from the CCTV, closed circuit TV, how it came apart. And then we found they actually brought a team in. The Army had a team back then called the Army Shoot Down Assessment Team, and they call it the ASDAT. And it was a bunch of senior Army aviator warrant officers, and they actually laid the blade out on a table, and you could see, all is not every piece, but almost every piece.
Wow. And
they were able to, from the residue on the blade, they could actually identify the lot number on the RPG that was shot.
No way.
I was impressed. They were very professional. They knew what they were doing.
That's some CSI shit.
That is. It's exactly right. It is CSI style. It was fascinating to me that they were able to get that kind of clarity. So we had all that. We had all their radio calls. There was a flight of 2 Apaches overhead, and they had a lot of it on. They didn't have the shoot down itself on tape, but I've listened to all their gun tapes. They saw the first RPG, and then they saw the second one, and they saw it go down, and they did a great job too. They were on top of it, putting down sort of containment fires around to make sure the enemy didn't move on the crash site within about 41 seconds after it was shot down.
Yeah, and again, for people listening, when you have ISR overhead, there's a lot of ways you can view it. And so people probably could have viewed that ISR not only from the United States, but tactical operations centers in Afghanistan. And
yes,
there's a good chance that the other portion of that element that wasn't on that operation was watching it happen live. And I can only imagine being in a TOC or a JOC somewhere and seeing that unfold, being unable to do anything and just watching an absolute catastrophe play itself out in real time.
Yes. And the thing I would say is the professionalism of everyone involved. There were some lessons learned for sure, and I still do a classified presentation on that. I still have my clearance with SOCOM. In fact, I did it for the Navy SEAL Ground Force Commanders course. I do it for I did it for the Marines recently, 82nd, others. Because there's certainly some lessons learned on air-ground integration and things like that, but no major failures. Was my takeaway.
One of the biggest irritations I have about that event is there's, for whatever reason, I can't tell if it's a large group or a small group. They're very vocal about how somehow Extortion 17 was payback for the Bin Laden raid.
I heard the same thing.
I would love to sit at a very quiet and geographically remote bar with these people and offer them no drinks whatsoever. And after I beat them to fucking death, consume their out. That's one of them. I'm just like, how deep down the rabbit hole do you have to go to try to, and what has made that one, I think, perpetuate a little bit, and I'll speak broadly about it, is that I have seen one of the family members pushing the narrative a little bit.
Yeah, I have too. I know exactly who you're talking about.
And it's rough because it's like,
well, they're right to be angry, right? It's their right.
100%.
Yeah, and that's the struggle. But the fact is that putting the SEALs out in that night, it was a contingency. It wasn't part of the base plan, right?
Yeah, it was a QRF call.
Yeah, well, exactly right. It was a QRF call, Quick Reaction Force. So we didn't know. The U.S. didn't know the SEALs were going to go in.
Yeah.
I think from the time they were notified that they were going in until they were in was about an hour. And that's everything, getting them on the airplane, loading, all that stuff. So it's hard for me to envision how they would have known. They would have had to have a guy in the jock.
Which I'm going to say is highly unlikely.
Highly.
Yeah. I have not met the Afghan version of Jason Bourne.
Yes,
So
exactly.
he would have to somehow have been in the jock.
Yeah. He couldn't have been in the coffee shop on the base. I mean, you know how it is there. We're not on our compounds. You know, I think I go off like 3 or 4 times in a 60-day rotation. Maybe.
You got everything you need.
Yeah. I mean, I go maybe buy some shaving cream or something or some gummy bears. You know, I'm an aviator, so we're sort of soft like that.
Yeah,
But,
I get it. Those are all delightful things.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it's crazy that you were the investigating officer on that.
On the team, for sure. I was the number 2. I was a 2 IC on that, second in charge. Jeff Colt, Brigadier General Jeff Colt, was the former 160th guy, little bird gun guy, was the lead.
So you go to flight school,
right?
Obviously, learn how to fly these ridiculous contraptions that are trying to kill you at all times. That's my description, not yours.
Yes, sir. But not totally inaccurate. Yeah,
they're just basically trying to rattle themselves to pieces, and they're held together by like 50,000 screws. Again,
lowest bidder.
Yeah, this is my assessment of what I've seen with helicopters.
Yes.
And so where does it go? You obviously graduate that. Where was your first assignment?
So I went to the 101st. I was flying medevac, and then you know what I realized, and I was as an NCO, a non-commissioned officer. I didn't understand the nuances between a warrant and a commission guy, right?
Yeah.
A warrant in the Army for sure is very technically focused.
It's supposed to be that way in the Navy as well. So I got my commission through the limited duty officer program.
Oh, so you're an LDO, okay?
Very heavy on the limited.
Yes.
Heavy limited light officer. That's how I like to describe it. But it's the same commissioning program. You can go warrant that way as well. And they are supposed to be the technical experts that bridges the gap between senior enlisted, junior officer in those roles. So they don't always seem to fit naturally there, but it also, the warrant, it's kind of weird. You can see people, they don't necessarily know where they're supposed to fall in the hierarchy.
Yeah,
because they're an officer, but they're not a line officer.
See, we don't have that problem in the Army because they stay warrant all the way through to CW5.
Same here. What I'm saying is there's like E9s, then there's a W3 in the meeting, then there's an O3 in the meeting, and people are like, who's in charge here? Right.
So for us in the 160th, our flight leads are warrant officers, and they are, really the equivalent of a operational planner, right? They're who you go to.
Yep.
Right. You got an air mission commander that calls in assets and plays a role there, an important role. But the guy who's getting you to the target and dealing with the first level of contingencies is a warrant officer.
Yeah.
But I also figured out, okay, as a former non-commissioned officer, that my opportunity to command or to have any kind of command-like responsibility was going to be limited. And I was up against time. So I was approaching 10 years. I was at 9 years at the time when I made the decision. So I applied to officer candidate school. So I went to Fort Benning and had my head shaved yet again, my third time where I've been, have my head shaved. Marine Corps boot camp, Army warrant officer, and now yet again as an officer candidate. And it was funny, when I graduated, I had already applied to the 160th as a warrant. And I had said, hey, if you guys pick me up, I won't go to OCS. I'll just come over as a warrant. I just wanted to be part of that team. Yeah. And they said, hey, you're too junior. We're not interested. Just go do whatever you're going to do. So I called them when I was a week out from graduation from officer candidate school. we had phone privileges and we could actually go out and eat at restaurants and all that stuff.
Treat you like a human being.
Exactly. Yeah. My peach fuzz was,
Been in the
whopping,
military for 9+ years and will now treat you like a human being. Thank you.
So I called the 160. I said, hey, I'm graduating from Officer Candidate School. I'm on orders the 82nd. I'd really like to come there. And they actually gave me a shot. They told me, we'll give you a shot. You're probably not going to make it. But you get your foot in the door, go get some more experience, come back.
What are they looking for when it comes to applicants? Is it just raw flight time?
Well, yeah, flight time. Did you advance? Were you a pilot in command? Character. There's a lot of things they're looking for. For a warrant, they're looking for slightly different things. They obviously are from a commissioned officer. So,
do they care between the two who's up front flying though, or do the seats? Do they kind of just, it doesn't matter, left seat, right seat? Could be a warrant, could be a commissioned.
It could be. It depends, but the majority of the time, it's obviously just sheer numbers. It's going to be a warrant.
Yeah.
There are very successful aviators that are commissioned guys in the 160th, but they, like you understand, they have to go do other stuff, or they're not going to get promoted. Where a warrant can
they can
stay
make
in
their
the
career
cockpit.
out of flying those things.
Exactly. So they said, okay, we'll give you a shot. They must have been, feeling particularly charitable the day that I went through my selection board or my assessment board, and they picked me up. Of course, then they made me the headquarters executive officer, so I was, handing out, food bags and ladling coffee as they went out on real worlds.
So you were flying a desk.
For 8 months, I was collecting for Combined Federal Campaign, all of the really glorious things. But then they promised me, hey, you do your stint here. You need to do this as an officer, and then we'll get you down to the company. And they did. And we were over in the Gulf back then. This was Operation Prime Chance. We were operating off those barges early. They had reflagging.
Before my time. What year are we talking here?
80. Well, they got over there maybe 87. I went over there first time in 88.
I was 11. So a little bit before my time.
Really? You weren't that engaged? You didn't follow the news or anything?
Listen, I was having a pitted battle between G.I. Joe and Cobra Commander at that time.
I see. Okay. So I'll make things simple for you. So the Reagan had reflagged Kuwaiti tankers to U.S. because Iran was laying mines there. So we were operating off of barges over there. And we had little birds over there, and I flew 60s. We called them Greyhawks that we had. And we flew around. We had a SEAL element that we flew over there. In fact, one of the guys that was on one of my rotations was that Lieutenant Connors that was killed in Panama on Patia Airfield.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah. Again, before my time, right. So I only heard that is.
Yeah, but I remember. I mean, he was shot and killed. He was on a team. Anyway, so we did that, and then Panama happened, and we rolled right into Panama and did that. We thought that was the biggest thing ever, right? Yeah. And then Desert Storm happened right after that. So I hit it at a good time. And right after Desert Storm, I left. I was a platoon leader flying DAPS for the 160th.
We should explain what that is.
That is a direct action penetrator. It's a modified Black Hawk for attack operations. So we used them going after Scuds being shot into Israel in Desert Storm. We carried two 19-shot rocket pods. At the time, 2 miniguns. Now they carry 30 millimeter cannons, Hellfires,
They're pretty badass.
They are, yes. They are a great airplane to fly.
I appreciated those DAPs many, many times, as well as the AH-6s. Those were awesome.
They're both great platforms. I had a chance to fly, both. The DAP is really, it can hang around a while. It's got a lot of ammo. If you're in an urban environment, AH-6s, they're super maneuverable. They can turn quick, get on you. But anyway,
you're also aiming with a grease pencil crosshair.
Yes. Which they are the masters of it. It is. You're right.
I'm not joking. I've watched them draw a grease pencil crosshair, and the guy was like, moved it and drew it again. I'm like, how in the hell do you know that's in the right spot?
Yeah, they run up one side of the pedal, count the rivets on the windshield, and then they use Kentucky windage after that. And you can get away with that if you shoot as much as they shoot. I mean, no one can shoot rockets like an AH-6 pilot, not a DAP pilot. I mean, they're exceptional. And it was a teaching session every time I was flying up front with those guys. They were just absolutely. And I was a battalion commander when I was flying AH-6s with them, so I wasn't their most proficient basic mission qualified pilot.
Well, you know what I like about the grease pencil? It requires no batteries.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
That heads-up display will not fail.
Yeah.
Unless you lose the canopy, in which case you probably have bigger problems.
Yes, you do. Yeah, things are probably going south for you at that point. Yeah. But and so we did that, and I got to fly a lot of time. And then I went and flew with the Air Force as an exchange pilot. So I went down to AFSOC at Hurlburt. This is before your time, but the rift between Air Force rotary wing guys, Pavlo pilots, and the 160th was really bad. It wasn't healthy competition, right?
Where did that come from? Was it just fighting for relevance and budget?
Yes, some of that, but also, you got two units doing the same mission, and there's not a lot of nuances. If you look at SEALs and Green Berets, they're sort of doing the same mission, but not really. They're different.
Yeah.
And there's still competition, as you know. But in here, it was like head to head, and it just wasn't healthy.
Pavlo is the 53, right?
Right, yeah.
I'm not a fan of that particular platform.
Yeah, it's not around. I mean, that version is not around anymore. Now they got the tilt rotors, the V-22s. But
also not a fan of that.
No, I think there's strengths with that bird. Going to the X is not. That's not the bird you want to go to the X with. I mean, but the speed is undeniable. If you got a Kazovac or something like that, or you got to cover a lot of distance, they can do things that a helicopter certainly can't do.
It's fair.
Yeah, but so I flew with the Air Force from 92 to 96. I was an instructor pilot down there. Met my wife there. She was an Air Force intel officer, and it was awesome. And then I went to some other assignments in the SOF community, and then ended up back in the 160th and was commanded first of the 160th and then commanded the regiment. I commanded first of the 160th, 1st Battalion 160th from 2006 to 2008, and then commanded the regiment from 2008 to 2010.
When you were down with the Air Force, obviously you were flying 60s. When it comes to learning how to fly the Pavlo, is it kind of like a type rating? You go through their course and you learn the specifics of that particular aircraft, and largely in the fixed wings, it seems to be obviously the propulsion and electrical systems and then the emergency procedures, because they all have their own book. Is it kind of the same thing? Yeah,
except the only thing I would add is the Air Force has different flying regulations, like in instrument flight and things like that they do different than the Army. So I had to learn all their regulations. And there was a lot more regulations on the Air Force side than there were on the Army side. So I had to learn all that. It wasn't bad. I got, I would say my assessment is the Air Force is much more regimented on adhering to checklists and following. And I'm not, throwing shade on Army aviators, but it's a different culture. And I'll never forget the first day and I already had 2,000 hours in a Black Hawk when I went to their Black Hawk course in New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Well, I get in, I'm flying with my instructor pilot first flight. And he said, okay, we're going to start with the checklist. I said, okay, you get the top, you get the bottom, I'll get the top. And I just start throwing switches, And he's like, the guy looks at me like, that's not the way we do it here. I was like, oh. I mean, it's very like the flight engineer says, battery switch, and you hit it, battery switch.
Oh, it's very positive back and forth.
Yes. And that's actually, I struggled with that, frankly, at first, but I see the logic in it. It's a good way to mitigate risk of, doing something stupid.
Yeah, most aviation accidents, I was paying attention to them much more when I was flying frequently, but they're almost always human error.
They are, about 90%.
People trying to memorize a checklist, and even though it's literally sitting right there with them in the airplane, they forget something, and it causes a controlled flight into terrain. And
I've bypassed checklists. Usually it's a distraction. Like I'm going through and something happens that causes me to, somebody hands me a new frequency card or something, then I lose my place. And
it's not a great feeling being behind the power curve of an aircraft.
You're flying out at night, got about a flight of 10 and you're like, isn't that switch supposed to be in another position?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you went back and were commanding the 160th, were you still flying? Or?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the 160th, they don't need me to fly an aircraft as Regimental Commander. I'm here to save you, men. Stand back. Follow me. But I did. I mean, I still had required to fly my minimums to stay current. I used to, used to give the guys when I go down range and I'd hop in an AH-6 and fly some combat sorties, and it was like relaxing. And they said, "Really, it's relaxing?" I said, "Well, back there, I'm surrounded by bureaucrats that are like trying to steal our money and do this or that and politics. Over here, you just find the enemy and deal with the enemy. I mean, it's much simpler,
What years were you flying the DAPs over in Iraq?
I flew the DAPs as an operational guy. The last time I flew the DAPs was Desert Storm.
Okay.
So I left shortly after that, but I flew them in Desert Storm. Now, I did take a DAP to Panama. We had one.
Really?
We had one. And Cliff Walcott, who was killed in Somalia in '93, and actually my middle son is Mitchell Walcott Hutmacher. He's named after him. We were very close. And we had one bird. So we brought our own pallet of ammo down there, and the regimental commander at the time said, "Hey, I need you to be an assault bird, not an attack bird." We got plenty of attack. There was Apaches from the 82nd. We had a bunch of AH-6s down there. So the little bird guys did not pass up the opportunity. They would come to my cot because we're all in one big hangar down there on Howard Air Force Base. And like, "So DAP, D-A-P, what does that stand for?" "Oh, wait, didn't attack Panama." I was like,
I love it.
Seriously?
Any opportunity that is available will be taken to rib your buddies.
Oh, God.
For sure.
Yeah, they were brutal.
Yeah. I tell you what, in my time, I worked with, obviously, the 160th for the short time that I was on the East Coast, but my time before that, I remember my very first helicopter ride. We were out at a desert training facility in Nyland, California. Mm-hmm. And it was a Marine Corps Huey, of all things.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just a bizarre experience. And then I worked about a lot with the Navy Seahawks, which is the Navy's version of the 60. To say that there is a difference in the precision flying between a conventional unit, which I have nothing but love and respect for those units, and then working with the 160th, it's kind of night and day. And I'm curious how, from a training perspective, you develop that. And that's, I mean, we would fly with them in the daytime all the time.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest with you, they make their money at night.
Oh, yeah. Well, Night Stalkers, right?
It's unbelievable, their ability to fly those helicopters at night in, urban areas, rural areas, like desert area. It's insane. I mean, how do you guys develop that level of capability?
Well, one of the ways they do it is they have a letter of agreement or memorandum of understanding in Army E's with the Army that the warrant officers there don't ever have to leave. They don't ever have to go to another duty station. As long as they're qualified and, a valued adding value to the unit, they can stay. So you get pilots.
You can retain pipe hitters then.
Exactly. So there's one pilot. I'll give you an example. I went through Green Platoon with a guy. He's retired now, CW5 Carl Meyer. And you may even remember his name. You definitely
I know his name, yeah.
Yeah. So he went through with me in '88 when we went through our initial assessment training program. He was in Somalia in '93, landed that little bird in the middle of the street, was shooting, holding the cyclic with his knees, shooting his MP5 out the side. When they recovered two.
Classic move.
Yeah. I mean, it's another day at the office, not a day I've had, but
Yeah. If you're listening to this and you're a pilot and you are ever in that situation, shit has gone so horribly wrong for you.
Yeah. Well, and then, so think about it. He went through in '88. He'd already been a pilot in the 82nd before that, in the cavalry in the 82nd Airborne. So he went through in '88. Now he's 93, 5 years into it. He goes through that. He retired probably 5 years ago. He was flying the same aircraft, doing the same mission. So they've seen everything, not everything, but they've seen various contingencies. I would also say that they get to hand select their pilots, right? Not everyone, it's not a direct assignment. It's not, here's your orders, you're going to the 160.
No, it's a selection and screening for
That's
sure.
right. It's an assessment process, selection assessment, which is part of special ops, right? That's a key component. And then I think there's a unit culture. And I was, when I first got there, they said, hey, the ground force is the customer. And that's the way I always treated them. I didn't care if the ground force commander was an E6 or an O6. he ran it. Now, I may tell him, give him my best advice, on how we should, employ the air.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, my commitment to them was, if we put you in, we're coming to get you out. I don't care what it takes, we're coming. And we won't leave you. And and I was also very focused on the whole reason we existed in the 160th was to support that operator on the ground. And the beauty of was, I may fly Green Berets or Rangers on a Monday or a Tuesday, SEALs on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
And our SOPs were so strong, our standard operating procedures, that we operated, I'd say, almost seamlessly with all of those elements.
Yeah, well, and hopefully all of those elements had a pretty, I'm sure there's some specific SOP or TTP differences, but from a gross macro perspective, they should be pretty similar.
They were.
After damn near 20 years of war, it's probably okay to shave off some of the BS.
Yes, yeah. And if you're focused, we're not a strategic, the 160th isn't the strategic application of air power, right? I mean, we may have strategic impacts, right? And clearly, there's some missions out there that where the results were very strategic in nature. But the fact is, we're a tactical force focused on supporting the tactical commander on the ground, whoever that may be. And I think that's in the culture of the 160. In fact, I love that about them.
Yeah, I saw them. It makes a lot of sense that they have that MOU that allows them to stay there forever, because that ability to retain knowledge, the things I've seen some of those guys do with helicopters is unbelievable. Like, let's just pull this little bird underneath a large concrete structure and put you 2 feet from the door.
Yes.
Like, okay. I guess I don't have to walk very far.
I didn't think that was an option, but yeah, okay.
Man, it makes sense. Like, how do they know this is going to fit here? Oh, he's been flying this for 30 years. He has a pretty good idea of where it's going to fit.
And you remember going on some of those rooftops in Iraq where they have those lips around the top and balancing on top of that, or going to those cupolas on top. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible the way some of that flying is. I mean,
and like I said, from a guy who was just sitting on the skids looking in, I could only watch it for a little bit just because of the velocity. Like, I'll be over here looking for bad people with guns.
Yes.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. There's some guys who got to fly. I think it was, I don't know, like left seat in an AH when we were at.
Yeah, we do that out at range 29. You go out there.
I had never gotten the chance to do that, but those guys would always get out of those things like, oh my God, it was awesome. Of course it's awesome. You're in a little Hornet, with rockets and oh yeah.
A buddy of mine, their nickname was the Killer Eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, those things were unbelievable. And I tell you what, I certainly lived and experienced the motto of, if you guys dropped us off, you would come get us. There were a couple days where light was just getting ready to come up, and the pilots, it's time to go. And I watched this guy whip a Chinook around and put just the rear 2 wheels on a structure. I mean, we're talking like such steep terrain. We were up in the Northeast, and essentially we needed to get on this helicopter. Our redeployment was going to be delayed, so everybody was very motivated to get on this Chinook.
It's funny how that works.
But just to watch him just come up at speed and whip it around and put it down, and like the aircrew guy's like, yeah, get on. I'm like, oh my God.
I know. And that, to me, I'm not saying you tap your heels together every day, come to work and sing a little jig, but when because when you're in the unit, just like, when you were in the SEALs, it's a job, you're doing your job. But when you look in the rearview mirror, you're like, man, that was
unbelievable.
A special time, man.
I saw a lot of the topography and geography of Afghanistan from inside of a Hilux, inside of a 46, just looking out the back of the ramp, just sitting there, just like, this is quite surreal.
Yes.
And the aircrew's like, you can't be in there. I'm like, I'm fucking in the truck, and I'm not getting out of the truck. It's a way more comfortable seat.
That's right. That's right. I got my seatbelt on if that makes you feel better.
If we go down, we're all dying. It's totally fine.
Yes. I'll just be in the truck. They'll find me in the truck.
Or maybe they won't. I'll gun this thing, get out of here, and find us like miles away. We'll be flat as a pancake, but...
Yeah. You went out, you'll be like, Dr. Strangelove in your Hilux coming out the back.
No, it was cool. So when you were commanding there, what rank were you at that point?
When I was commanding a regiment, I was a colonel.
Okay. And that's, colonel is...
06.
Okay.
Yeah. The equivalent of a Navy captain.
I was going to say, of course, there has to be one service that has everything jacked up. The Marine Corps is totally on board with the rank structure.
Air Force, for the most part.
Yeah. And then you put the old 1-star on.
Which was, course, that was never the plan. You know, my strategic goal when I joined the Marine Corps was making sergeant. Literally, I was like, man, sergeants, they got to
Well, you nailed that one.
I did. And then when I was commissioned, I was looking at it, I was like, you know, selection rate to major 04 is like 65%. That's a good goal. I can, you know, if I can make that, I'm good. You know, it's just one of those things. You know, it's better to be lucky than good.
Yeah.
You know, so I was in the right spot. I was on some great missions, and then I made 1 star, and it was, you know, it was an honor, and I'm glad it, you know, it happened. I went up to 2 star. I was able, you know, I was my boss, General Thomas. I was the director of operations at U.S. SOCOM on my last job. And he, you know, I remember I was up in Washington, D.C., and I was approaching 40 years at that point. And my wife, you know, has been telling me, you know, you're working for free. Like you totally
have the wives, she's straight.
Yeah, you know, I mean, my wife's like, listen, it's my job to let air out of your tires, and,
it's fair.
And she's relatively good at it. But she said, so, you know, we'll stay. We're in, you know, we had 3 sons. They were, you know, we're in, obviously, but just think about it. And I just up and called my boss, you know, General Thomas, and, you know, asked him if he had time to hook up for a VTC.
Video teleconference, also known as military Zoom.
That's right, military Zoom. And I said, hey, you know, this is what I'm thinking about. And he said, well, I was going to move you over to be the chief of staff of SOCOM, which is another lateral move to a 2 star, but with the potential to potentially do or go, you know, on to 3 star. And I thought about it, and I said, sir, if you need me to stay, I'll stay. If you're asking me what I want to do, I just soon get out. And he was very gracious, and he's actually the chairman of the board of the Special Ops Warrior Foundation, which I run now, which I took over from a very a great SEAL, Joe McGuire.
Yep.
And so I made the decision, and I retired about a month shy of 41 years by the time I got through all the VA stuff and, you know, got my retirement orders and all that junk. And I stepped right into the Special Ops Warrior Foundation because Joe went up and took a position with the Trump administration as the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. And I've been there ever since. I've been there 3.5 years since I retired, and I love it. I'm still helping families, doing great stuff.
Yeah, it seems like you're still directly involved.
Absolutely. I talk to all the service. You know, we take care of all services in SOF. Everyone.
Yeah. How was life as a 2 star? Because I had 2 bars.
Yeah.
And life was fine.
Yeah.
But I had talked to a flag officer one time in the Navy, and I forget I forget why the hell I was even talking to a flag officer, because the move is get the hell out of there.
Yeah. I was going to say that's sort of a foul, but
yeah. But I think he had sparked the conversation with me, and he made a statement along the lines of, when you become a flag officer, you'll always eat well.
Yep.
You're going to probably have a great living and travel condition.
Yep, that's
and it's
true.
likely that nobody will ever tell you the truth again.
All true. I would say, you know, I mean,
it's rarefied air up there.
It is. And, you know, I tell people it's not all you think it's going to be.
As is everything.
But, and, you know, I'm glad I did it. I was able to help people and do things and affect some change as a flag that you're just not going to be able to do otherwise. And so it was, you know, I was at my 2 star time. I did 2 star jobs. One, I was the U.S. Army Special Ops Command Deputy Commanding General, working for a great guy, Ken Tovo, Green Beret. And then I went down to U.S. SOCOM and was the director of ops. And both of those jobs, you know, I was a deputy commander at Fort Bragg, but in SOCOM in MacDill, I was a staff guy. Really. I mean, I had, you may know my SEA, Senior Enlisted Advisor, was Brownie Brunel, who...
I know the name.
Yeah, he was a East Coast SEAL. Great guy, just retired as a Master Chief. But, I mean, I basically ran ops, and it was a grind. I mean, it was, you know, video teleconferences.
It's long hours.
Long hours. You got what I call frequency hopping. You're in one meeting with the Joint Staff talking about North Korea, and the next one is about Yemen or something else. And, it was a lot to keep up with. So it was hard work, but I enjoyed it. I would have done it all over again, you know.
Did you notice enlisted people running away from you once they saw the stars on your uniform?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But listen, I never forgot where I started, right?
Well, and I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I always felt like, I mean, I wouldn't say I would have made a different decision, but I had that perspective of being that low-ranking troop, you know, living under a mushroom where everybody's heaping crap on you all day. So I'd always consider, one, how that would impact soldiers. And it also, probably the biggest thing it did for me was informed how I messaged any change. So I blocked out the whole time I was in the 160 as the 1st Battalion Commander and as the Regimental Commander, 2 hours a week where I just walked the line, you know, and it wasn't an inspection. It wasn't like, you know, hey, your haircut's not right. I never did anything like that. It was more getting the pulse, right? What's going on with the unit? Hey, what are your biggest problems? What can I fix? And I felt like that was really effective, you know, and 2 hours a week was about all I could do. But I was able to take care of some stuff there and, you know, and get some little victories for them and also get their feedback and, you know, clarify, hey, why is the policy this and why are we doing that, you know?
That's a big one for compliance with people. You know, people who didn't serve in the military, I think often, and maybe this is from movies, they think it's authoritarian and everybody falls in rank and file.
Right.
And that was not my experience.
Not at all.
I actually found critical thinking to be highly rewarded inside of the special operations community, and the opportunity to ask why. Still my favorite question, why? Why do we do this? Why is this the tactic?
Right.
Where does this come from? Because if you can only tell me that this is what we're doing because somebody else told you that, that's not a good place to be. I want to understand why we're being told to do this and where it comes from. Now, of course, the military is a rank-based organization, and when you're in a gunfight, if you tell somebody to break right and they look over at you and go, but why? It's like, motherfucker, you're dead as soon as I'm going to kill you. Like, there's a time and place for that as well.
True.
But the commanders and leaders that I enjoyed the most were the ones that would make the time to interface. And the reason I asked about the 2-star or just a flag officer in general is from somebody who spent most of their career on the enlisted side. Mm-hmm. When the 2-star shows up or the boss, you might give them a little bit of feedback, but most of the time you're just trying to get out of there without getting in trouble.
Right. Well, you got to be careful, right? You ask that higher headquarters to help in air quotes. Yeah. And usually it gets you a lot of scrutiny and, you know, so it
gets you a visit from the sergeant major after the 2-star leaves.
They're all, you know, what the hell are you talking to that general for?
You will run all questions through me. Like, damn it.
It was harder. It was easier when I was commanding the 160th to have those kind of candid conversations with troops.
Like you said, the unit, the cohesion, the culture, all of that.
You're right. As a flag officer, it was very hard. Because, and they also, if you go visit a unit, you know, and you say, hey, I'm just going to walk around for 2 hours. Are you kidding me? I mean, there's no way they're going to let that happen.
No, because we need the requisite 1 week before the flag officer shows up to tighten up all of our shit, get a haircut, get a shave, hide the trash, get this out of here. And then when the flag officer is there for 30 seconds, everybody can then just relax and unwind.
Yeah, and their worst nightmare is you walking around and talking to some
100%. You find the E3 who has an axe to grind, and you'll see the E8 or 9 just lighting him on fire with his eyes as he actually tells you the truth.
Well, what I did, the only way I could somewhat mitigate them blocking me into certain things is I'd always ask them to build in time for me to have maybe lunch with the enlisted guys.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it a sensing session, but just a sit down with the non-commissioned officers and then the junior officers. And so you build out time, say, hey, this is what I want to do. And I tell them, I don't want anybody in there. You know, just because private
Which terrifies a lot of people.
It does, but you can, you know, I had a first sergeant one time to me, an E8, you know, senior enlisted NCO. Some private said something stupid to me. I mean, I forget what it was. It was, you know, why can't we have, you know, prostitutes in the barracks or something
God
like
bless
that.
privates.
Yeah, right.
And their thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have this, most of them, and I'm, you know, are in that booger-eating moron stage of life, which I was, you know, a card-carrying booger-eating moron myself. But I looked at him, the first sergeant, because he's like making an excuse. I said, hey, Top, Don't worry about it. I'm not going to change the rotation of the earth based on Private Schmuckatelli here. Give me a little credit.
Yeah.
It's important for him to feel like he can say this stuff to me. And you just got to be mature enough to recognize, okay, this is not valid. We're not doing that, you know. But
why can't we pay these helicopters zebra striped?
Right. Yeah. What can we have the tiger teeth on the front or something, So you just got to be able to filter that. But there's still value in them saying, hey, that guy, he actually listened to what I had to say. And in the middle, and in many of those times, you get a nugget which is valuable. They'll say, hey, we have this problem with the aircraft and we've been trying to fix it forever, and we can't. I said, I can help with that, and you can help. And I was also sensitive to protect the source.
Yes.
So I didn't say, hey, I was down there and Petty Officer Stumpf said, that we should, they needed more 40 millimeter rounds, or they needed, more training time on the range or an indoor range or something.
Or a day off.
Right. Yeah. Day off, God forbid. So what I would say is, hey, during my time, when I was talking to the junior petty officers, they said, this is what they were thinking. Why wouldn't we do that? Just tell me if there's a good reason why we wouldn't do that. Just tell me what it is. Kill me with logic. That used to be my thing.
Yeah.
Kill me with logic. Tell me why. And then, I said, well, why wouldn't we do that? Well, I don't know. And that way, Andy's not on the X, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that go a different direction where the senior officer specifically said exactly who asked the question, and shortly thereafter, that individual was taped up.
Yes, right. So you've got to be, and see, for my junior enlisted days, I had that perspective of, hey, this is not a time for you to talk. Just sit there.
Yeah.
When they ask you if you want help, they're lying. They're not. They don't want. They don't want to help you.
Yeah, they're on an intel gathering mission.
Exactly. So I was always very careful to protect them because I did not want. The last thing I wanted was them some blowback on them.
Yeah, I don't think that all officers. I don't think it's a requirement, nor should it be, to have previous enlisted experience. But I do think that it helps because it gives you. I describe it as you have a better understanding of how the sausage is made.
You do, but you also have to understand that you're not that anymore.
Correct.
Right now, you have a
to draw
different
the
role.
line.
You're right. And I ran a standards-based organization. We have standards, and when you violate those standards, it's not personal. It's about protecting the capability and uphold, good order and discipline in the unit. So you have to be able to make that transition. You're not. It's like when I made corporal E4. Now as a squad leader in the Marine Corps, and of course the Marine Corps, an E3, God forbid, cannot call an E4 by his first name.
That is a grave sin.
Yes, especially in the Marines. And so, your role changes, right? Your role changes instantaneously.
Yeah.
And you just got to be aware of that. You have different responsibilities.
So as your career progressed and you were working at these major commands, I'm assuming that you were probably starting to be involved in very strategic level conversations and planning.
Yeah. Yeah. Depending on the job. Some of it was training, resourcing, equipping, strategic discussions about new capabilities we needed, in the future. Other times when I was in SOCOM, it was more strategic decisions about the employment of SOF. A lot of them focused on resource allocation.
Yeah.
How many SEAL teams or SEAL elements are going to Central Command area? How many are going to Southern Command?
How many are in reserve? What are we doing to the force, the op tempo?
And then how are we managing the force so we don't overextend them and break the force, right? So, and of course, the geographic combatant commanders, Central Command, Southern Command, European Command, African Command, they all want more because they're the users. They're going to employ the capability. Then you got Naval Special Warfare Command, U.S. Army Special Ops Command, Marine Special Ops Command, Air Force Special Ops Command, who are saying, hey, you're going to break the force, right? So you've got it's a tension there.
Yeah.
And, the part of my job was to, try to get as much out of that force as we could to get employed, to support the national objectives, but not break the force, And I remember being a 160th commander in Iraq when General McChrystal was the JSOC commander. Man, we were over there all the time. And our aircraft, we were bringing it back full of bullet holes and broken and getting them fixed and turned back into the fight. so we had adequate combat power and enough to train when the guys are back, right? And to, you know, to keep filling our ranks with new blood and new trained crew members, that was like almost smoke and mirrors. I mean, and that's one of the reasons I did those hour walks around, because that kid who's fixing engines, who has no idea what's going on downrange, you know, he's like taking his little lunchbox to work, and you know, you got to make sure they understand how important they are, because they are critical.
That operational tempo, let alone from the asset perspective, I think it was close to breaking the SMUs as well.
Oh, yeah.
And it was cascading
Everybody.
down. I mean, I know guys who have been at the command out east who have done like 15, 17, 18.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know where I land on whether or not that's the best call. I don't want to limit them in any perspective, but I also want them to have a fulfilling life after that.
Yeah.
And I think those are kind of the unknowns of where we are as a country now and how long we've been engaged kinetically.
Well, SOF was never, you know, we never operated like that. You know, especially on the special mission unit side, there's an objective, you fly in, you take the objective, you complete the mission, and you go home. You weren't there for sustained combat, you know, at least most of the elements were. It depends on your mission. Green Berets obviously operate in denied territory and things like that, training partisans, but 9/11 changed all that. You know, we became the force of choice. I mean, you know, my humble opinion, General McChrystal and the task force in Iraq, you know, that whole pre-surge stuff, they're the ones that won. I mean, they're the ones that kept the enemy leadership off balance and attrited them at a high rate so that surge could take hold and we could build security. I mean, that's my opinion. I mean, I could be completely wrong on that, but I was there and I saw that op tempo.
Yeah.
I just remember having to buy more TVs so I could monitor more missions. We had like big screen TVs. You've been in those jocks before.
Oh, yeah.
And I had...
Yeah, you can get lost in the information flow.
Yeah, we had like 6, 7 missions going on simultaneously. And I'm like, what mission? I had to take a dry erase board, cut little sections out. So with a marker, we could put on there, okay, this is objective Tahoe or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Just so I knew, okay, that's Tahoe, got it. Yeah, they're running low on ammo. We got to flex stuff over here or whatever.
I don't think anybody ever thought it would reach that peak level of activity.
It was craziness, man. It was absolute craziness. I mean, our pilot, the AH-6 pilots at one point, right before the surge, were flying up to 200 hours a month, which is insane.
And I'm assuming most of that is in
combat,
little to no light.
Oh, yeah, all night. I mean, I'd say 99% of it was night.
Yeah, other than some probably crazy...
Well, we had a day mission, as
some daytime vehicle interdiction stuff would probably pop it off.
That's the only stuff. Most of the guys were flying nights. You're right. So it wasn't 99%. It was less than that. But that's an airplane that's not easy to fly. It's not like you hit autopilot and go, you know, do donuts in the sky. I mean, this is hard flying.
How are the Blackhawks? Do they have a little bit of
they're easier to fly. I mean, there's different challenges with a Black Hawk. You know, we fly them right up to max gross weight. I mean, we get so close we'd be weighing guys.
I would say in my own experience that you guys would fly them up exactly to where it wouldn't take off anymore.
Yes. When I was in Desert Storm, our Blackhawks were so heavy because this was for an attack mission. We had to have extra fuel on board to get it. We were going all the way from Saudi up to Al Qaim and up in that area. And we didn't have enough gas. So we had these old Huey Blivet bags in the back, cargo strapped to the floor.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, we're just bouncing down the runway. You know, we're pumping those things out because I said if we crash, those things are the bowling balls and we're the pins.
Hey, at least every minute you're flying, you're getting a little bit lighter.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
No, I figured the Black Hawk had more assist. I feel like you and I should get to an airport. If you could turn it on, I mean, obviously get in there with me. I want to see if I could fly that thing.
Well, the hard part is starting it, right?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know how to do any of that shit.
Yeah. Well,
I need you to get it out of idle and ready to... I know there's some twist involved to take it out of ground idle. I was paying attention to that shit, just in case
you were needed up front?
In case one day they turn around, they're like, listen, I can't fly this anymore. Has anybody been watching? I'd be like, yes, I have been.
Highly unlikely scenario, I might add.
Not in my imagination. I would have scenarios where it's like, for whatever reason, the Black Hawk landed and the pilots got out to do something and then they never came back.
Yeah, I went out to take a leak and you hopped in the seat?
Yeah, and they never came back. And I'm like, gentlemen, board the aircraft. And I would fly it.
I'm like, I'm walking.
100%.
Yeah.
I tell you what, you would have the answer to this too. God, and this is such a dumb question, but the number of hours I have spent with guys talking about this. So for this hypothetical question, we have to remove the tail rotor because the aircraft's not actually going to take off.
Okay.
I have spent countless hours talking to guys, and we try to figure out, as you start the main engine, how many revolutions of the blades we could hold on to before it throws off. Because it doesn't start that fast.
And you said you've had how many hours discussing this?
Hundreds. Because we would all sit, I mean, we're sitting there at the flight line, and for people who've never seen a Black Hawk turn on, I mean, first you hear the turbine kick, and it starts very slow. It's like, when the blade comes, and then
I'd say within
quicker.
about 15 seconds. And that's your strongest guy?
Yeah, I thought I could hold on for 3 rotations.
That's probably reasonable. The problem is you're going to flex that blade down so far.
We have to remove all of the potentially striking the aircraft. We were going purely on speed and centrifugal force.
Okay, so there's like a pole sticking out of the ground with nothing around it.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I give you 3 rotations.
Yeah, because it added up pretty quick.
I would start a pool on that.
That's
There
what
comes
I'm telling
Andy.
you.
1, I'm in it.
Hundreds of hours, guys sitting there like, I could still hold on to that. I could hold on to that. And then we, of course, like, hey, the rules are no tail rotor, right? I'm like, obviously, you'd get chewed up by that on the first rotation.
Especially in a Chinook, yeah.
God.
Or you got to like flex over the tail boom when you go over the back.
Isn't it? It's kind of deflating to hear how dumb the dudes are in the back that you were flying around, isn't it?
Well, I always thought you guys were having very strategic discussions back there, but clearly I was
we were talking
misinformed.
about how long do you think the strongest guy could hold on to the main rotor blade as the aircraft started?
I'm sure all my 160th alum that are listening saying, no way, that's what they were talking about?
A lot of the time.
Yeah.
A lot
Awesome.
of the time. Man. Yeah, those helicopters pulled our asses out of the fire more than once. I couldn't have been more impressed with their capabilities. I'll probably just keep saying that over and over again this episode because, you know, it's funny. I get hit up all the time, people saying, you got to have a 160th guy. I'm like, I don't fucking know that many 160th guys. They all have an open invitation, but so here we are.
Yeah,
But,
I think Mike Durant's going to come see you, right?
yeah, we had a scheduling conflict. I think he's going to come in the summer when things calm down for him.
Yeah. He's his story in Somalia in '93 is really pretty compelling.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that.
He is so fortunate to be alive. I was his platoon leader in Panama and Desert Storm. And, you know, he's running for U.S. Senate now.
Yeah.
And he's doing really well in his campaign. But, yeah, that was a heck of a story. I remember I got the call from his wife that he was missing. I was down flying with the Air Force at the time. And I thought he was dead. I mean, like, well, where is it? I don't know. There's nobody at the crash site. I said, I'm thinking he's gone.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if it were me in that situation, he would come up and take care of my family. So I just called my boss, said I got to go up there. I took leave, and I was a captain in '03, you know, Army captain, and that was a chunk of change to buy a ticket on short notice like that. But I thought, you know, just make sure that his family squared away. I didn't know he was alive till I got up there to Fort Campbell.
How long was he missing for? It was over a day, right?
Nah, maybe, yeah, close to it. Maybe 12 hours. I'm not sure, but they came out with a video of him. Remember that? You know, he's braced up against the wall because his back was broken and all that. And I remember I flew up that morning. She told me, so I don't know how long he was missing before that. I got up there in early afternoon. Fort Campbell's about an hour away from the airport in Nashville. And when I got there, the video was already out.
Yeah. Yeah, I look forward to, I mean, obviously I've only watched the documentary Black Hawk Down, which should not be viewed as a documentary.
No. It's accurate in some areas, but not very accurate in others.
As are some war movies.
Yes.
People will ask me often about what movies get it right. And my answer is none of them in totality.
Yeah.
But if you combine about the first 10 minutes of Saving Private Ryan with some of the scenes in Black Hawk Down, It's pretty damn close to what it can actually feel like.
Well, and there were some people there, Black Hawk Down, I think they got the big pieces right. But they're also, they're quick to say, the 160 that participated in that, they were ordered to.
Yeah, voluntold.
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering where they got the assets to film that.
Well, I think what I was told was they came out and said, hey, the producers, the movies said, hey, we want to do this movie. We want 160th birds there because that's an essential part of the story. And the first request came down and we said, absolutely not. But then I think it was either the Secretary of the Army or the Secretary of Defense said, this is in the best interest of the Department of Defense, and you're doing it. So they filmed it in Morocco.
Actually, I was going to guess that.
Yeah, Rabat, just south of Rabat in a suburban area there. Yeah.
I wonder if the production company paid for the gas?
I think there is. That's part of the deal. They have to pay the DOD, non-DOD rate.
Because that would be a stiff check to write.
Oh, well, a Black Hawk. I can't. I don't have any idea what it is now, but at one point back then, I think it was probably a couple $1,000 a flight hour.
Oh, it'd have to be. Yeah. I mean, let alone the maintenance costs, which I'm sure they didn't probably pick up at the gas tab alone.
Oh yeah,
pretty substantial.
Well, if they charge you by the hour, it's
all in there.
It's all in there. Yeah.
I don't think I'll be renting any Blackhawks anytime soon.
That's why they're not real prevalent in the civilian world. I mean, they're just not an economical platform.
Makes sense. Yeah, the reason I asked you about the meetings that you were in is all of my experience in the military. If you're looking at the types of war or levels of war, strategic, operational, and tactical, mine was all tactical. Like very, in hindsight, very myopic lens on what specifically I was tasked to do, what my roles and responsibilities were. I was never even involved in any operational conversations, let alone strategic.
Right.
And, my views on war now in my mid-40s after spending 17 years in the military and more of that time post 9/11 than pre, they're very different. And I'm always fascinated and curious by the conversations that are had at a strategic level as to the human capital cost and the long-term consequences of engagements like Iraq and Afghanistan, or if they even discuss those things. I think when we first went into Afghanistan, it was relatively rapidly. So they probably, I don't think they had any idea what it was going to turn into. But I wonder now, after those two mature theaters of war, what the conversations are like and how much thought is put into it, because I hope it's substantial, and I hope that it's substantially more than I hope it is. Because the human cost, I think, is hard to calculate.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just to give you an idea, I don't know, we probably have in our foundation right now, we're committed to funding of all the special ops services, 970 something. It changes every day because a kid graduates college.
Yeah.
They come off of that. When I asked our staff how many of those kids lost a parent in Afghanistan, 434 of them. So that's a significant chunk, almost half of what we lost. So there's probably, and I'm quick to tell people, that name that's engraved on those memorials, we all have them, right, to honor our dead, as we should. That name and that wall is only the tip of the iceberg on the cost. The rest is that family behind it, the mother, the father, the siblings, the spouse, the kids. Everything's different for them in the blink of an eye. It's a knock on the door and everything's completely different, not in a good way. So that's the human cost. I've spent a lot of time in Afghanistan, of course, a lot of time in Iraq, and it is easy to be an armchair quarterback looking in hindsight. Some of the questions are, I think we got into nation building as a nation, with our political leadership and military leadership possibly, took that on as an objective.
I would say the military is not good at that.
No, they're not. I mean, but they're the only, so that's really a State Department mission, but they don't have the resources to do it. I mean, there's many instances of that where that's not a DOD, a Department of Defense mission, but they get it because
that's what they got.
They got the most toys to do it. The other thing that I think, in my experience, my last long trip to Afghanistan was 2011 to 12, and I stood up this Afghan Special Mission Wing over there, which was like a fixed wing ISR, sort of a surveillance bird, and then some Mi-17 Russian helicopters to support the Afghan commandos over there. And what I found over there when I was down in Kabul for that rotation was there was no sense of accountability or no sense of urgency. Like I got over there and they said, hey, we're pulling out in 14. That was the guidance at the time. And you got to build this capability by then. And that means, training the maintenance guys, buying the airplane, everything.
Yeah, it's not just the shiny toys.
Oh, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, we got to move out. But what I noticed was this sort of, from not everyone, but a lot of people was, hey, none of this is going to happen on my watch. And so, and I know General Thomas has made the comment several times, we fought that war 1 year at a time. And and if you contrast that with World War II, my dad was in World War II. He was a medic in the Army, in Patton's Third Army. I mean, you're in it to win it, baby. You're not coming back until the end.
Yeah, there's no RIP date.
Right. And if there was an existential threat to the United States, and we had to put the forces in for that, it would probably be the same thing. But, politically, there was no way that was going to fly, that we were going to go over to Afghanistan. We're going to stay there until we win it. Yeah. Because he didn't even know what victory was. There was, if you're going to, does that mean we got schools established, we got a finance system established, they're a democratic form of government? I mean, what's the end state?
Yeah.
So,
are we holding terrain? Are we building an army? Like, what are we doing here?
Right. And there was elements of all of that, but not, I think, clearly defined. So, some people, and I've had some senior, corporate folks and former government folks say, well, it was treasonous what the military did, senior leadership. I was like, I'm pretty sure no one started out and said, hey, I'm going to just blow this off.
Yeah.
The guidance was constantly changing. The objectives were constantly changing.
And I felt that even at a tactical level. Hey, guys, no more night raids.
Yes, I was there then.
Yeah. Hey, guys, 1-to-1 ratio, partner force. Hey, guys, 2-to-1 ratio, partner force. Hey, guys, we can't go over here, and we can't. It's like, holy shit. And obviously that gets told to us through the Battle Space Commander, but it's not like the Battle Space Commander is developing that guidance. No. It's just cascading downhill.
Well, what they're trying to do is hand it off to get the Afghans to do more so we can get out. That was clearly what they were doing there. But you're right. But then it's like, when you pull the plug, when is the right time?
Yeah.
And so again, hindsight's 20/20, and I'm not condemning anyone, but we went into Afghanistan, and within a month we had achieved all of our objectives, right? Now you got to ask the question, was that the time to get out? Not to get out totally, but maybe to negotiate, hey, we're going to maintain a strategic base here. Bagram would be a great one, easy to defend that.
Strike almost all over the country from there.
Well, and you got Iran on one coast, it's on one border. So, and it's better to say, hey, we're going to help you grow, but we're not going to do combat operations. And I think, because I think having the U.S. military in there generated violence at some level, right? I mean, if we had a bunch of Taliban running around here occupying us, I'm pretty sure we'd be fighting.
Well, I think the U.S. presence definitely will bring people, U.S. military presence will bring those who want to test themselves against it. And I think Iraq was the test bed for that. Yeah. I mean, the Syrian influence, a lot of the VB IEDs, a lot of the IEDs, the
Iranian stuff.
And then all of a sudden those tactics started showing up in Afghanistan as well.
You're right.
I think
you're right.
It's where the nest is where the bees will go. Yeah, the hindsight one is I don't judge. Well, I don't know if that's not right. I judge, but I try to temper it through the lens of I'm looking at things that happened in the past. I think, it probably would have been best for us not to commit what we committed to Afghanistan, but I do believe that the Battle Space Commanders were doing the best they could with the missions that they were tasked with.
I agree.
But I also will add to that, I hope our leaders learned a lesson from that and take those lessons into the decision-making processes going forward. Because I don't want my kids or your kids or anybody else's kids to have Afghanistan or Iraqi dust on their boots or anywhere else for that matter.
Yeah. No, I hope you're right. And I think, the problem with after action reviews are that a lot of people don't pay attention to them. They'll do an in-depth study. They'll look at everything because, it's a very complex thing. You're going to look at how do we do logistics? How do we do this? How do we do that? There's political decisions that were made. So how do you implement those, especially when 10 years from now, none of those people will be in government?
Yeah.
General Garrison after Somalia said something that I thought was pretty profound, and I've always remembered it. And he might not have been the originator of it, but that's who I remember hearing it. He said, we really stopped learning most new lessons a long time ago. We just keep relearning the same ones over and over again. And that's why, when I get new pilots in the 160th, and I would always go talk to them and NCOs when they were in the training phase, the evaluation phase, I'd say this tactical SOP, this standard operating procedure, I said it was written on the blood of the people that went before you. So everything in here, the way we do forward area refueling operations in the middle of the desert, the way we fly formation, the way we, where we land on objectives, how we land. All of those lessons, most of those lessons, not all of them, most of those lessons were learned when we lost someone. So that's why this is important. You may question it, it may not make sense to you, but believe me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that scrutinize this, and there's a lot of names on the wall in front of the regimental headquarters memorial that paid the price for us to have and you said that capability that the 160th brings. There was a lot of hard lessons learned over the years to get there.
Same in the SEAL community. Right.
But at the strategic level, I don't know that you have. I mean, did you ever read that book, The Bear Went Over the Mountain, right after 9/11?
Yeah.
That was about the Russian view. There was one view from the Russian side about Afghanistan, another view from the Afghan side. We all read it. We're going to be these, warrior scholars and this and that. And it all made sense to me, but it certainly didn't influence any decisions. Because like you, I was an 04 major level. Nobody said, hey, Clay, what do you think we should do about this? They're like, hey, go get in that aircraft. You're the Air Mission Commander. Go fly that mission. So I hope that I'm with you. I hope that we have learned. I'm just not sure there's a clear vehicle or path to make sure that those lessons are learned. At the tactical level, there is.
Yeah.
At the strategic level, I'm less sure.
And that's the problem, right? At the tactical level, they have to wade their way through that blood, and they feel the weight of the blood and the consequences of it. At the strategic level, or at the level where decisions are made to send those forces to execute those jobs, they don't feel that weight.
No, and I think, the war colleges, whether it's the Navy, Army, Air Force, Marines, they'll debate it. I'm sure people are writing papers on it right now. And that, in some level, is good. It informs folks, but I'm not sure. It would not shock me at all that 20 years from now we're involved in some thing like in Afghanistan or Iraq, and we do the exact same thing that we do.
What do you think the odds are that we end up back in Afghanistan?
Near term, I'd say very low. I think that just the political crow that would have to be eaten if we went back in there would be unacceptable, right? I mean,
in the current term.
Yes, that's what I mean, in the near term, right? So it would have to be a pretty big threat, and it would have to be the only way we're going to deal with it is going in there to get it. And then it would be air power only, over the horizon strike or whatever. Yeah. I saw former Secretary Gates called it over the rainbow, like what a fantasy that is. I thought that was very funny. His words, not mine. Yeah. But I don't think in the near term. I think it's possible. I think it's just as likely or even more likely we're going to be somewhere else. I mean, you see current events with Russia right now. I mean, who would have thought that? I mean, it's unbelievable. And
it truly is. People keep asking me, like, what are your thoughts on Ukraine? I'm like, first off, I'm not an expert on Ukraine. at all.
Me either.
I think war should be a measure of last resort. It's sloppy.
Yeah, and who knows? I can't speak for him, but I got to believe at some level Putin's got some buyer's remorse that, it's not.
I would think so. I don't think it's going as well as he potentially thought it would.
Yeah, I don't think he expected the sort of the unified response that they're having. And I think, when you start affecting people's pocketbooks and their quality of life, and I mean, you can't, if you opened up your news app on your phone right now, it'll be yet another half a dozen companies that cut ties with Russia.
Yeah, that actually does seem to be the trend.
Yeah. So you're right, though. I mean, combat war is not something to be taken lightly, and it never goes as you think it's going to go. Yeah. Never.
So it's so less black and white than people who have never touched it think it is. And I'm so glad that most people will never experience it. But it makes it difficult to explain how things happen sometimes or why decisions are made.
Well, Panama, we were in and out, right? We left a small token force. That's probably an example. And right now, I haven't been down to Panama lately, but I understand it's thriving there. But it was pretty ugly right after. I remember all the articles and the news shows that people are starving down here. They don't have reliable power, but they're in a better place now.
Yeah.
So
how'd you... It sounds like as you were leaving the military, you knew, like, boom, I'm going to go for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation.
No, not at all. In fact, I thought I'd be here on your podcast peddling why you should buy a Black Hawk helicopter, which we talked about.
Let me just tell you, if I had cash to buy a Black Hawk, I would invest in that.
You would?
I would. And then I would have you come up every once in a while to turn it on for me, and then I would go crash it. But in this scenario, I'm a billionaire. So I would probably fly it with the base jumping parachute on. Mm-hmm. Fly until it ran out of gas, not even attempt to land it, just ghost ride it over the horizon somewhere, jump out, buy another one, be like, Clay, I need you to come and turn it on again on Thursday, and
I'm not sure how many of those evolutions you would be around. So no,
the FAA might have an issue with my plan.
Your spouse, family might have an issue. I mean, I'm going to go crash a helicopter today and base jump out of it.
I mean, of course, it would be described completely differently.
Yeah.
It would be a training evolution.
Yes, I see.
To enhance and refine my skills.
I suspect that your wife has already seen through your facade of crap on that one.
I try to be very honest about. I'm like, hey, I would like to start skydiving again, and it's I'm getting married in August, and she just kind of shakes her head. She's like, I know that you need to do these things, but please be as careful as possible.
Yeah. So no, it was funny. I was getting out. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Right. And General Brown, former SOCOM commander before your time, I think, but he used to be a 160th guy, and he called me one day and we were talking about, he was sort of mentoring me on different things I should think about when I, enter the life after. And at the end of the conversation, he said, would you ever consider running a nonprofit? And I almost said no. But what I said instead was, sir, I'd be happy to learn more. I'd certainly consider it. And I didn't even know what nonprofit it was. And he said, okay. And what I didn't know is that Vice Admiral McGuire had been nominated to go up on the Trump administration. He has to go through the whole confirmation process and all that stuff. But that he was, and then they told me what it was. And then I was all in because I didn't know a lot of what they did. I knew that they took care of our families and our kids. I didn't know all their programs. But the more I learned, the more I was like, you know what? Hey, this is a righteous cause. It's noble work. And I'm proud to be part of it. I mean, I signed up for an initial 3-year stint that was up last September. I signed up for another 3-year stint with them. And, I like it, one, because it helps people that have given the last full measure of their devotion to the country, their kids, right? And if something happened to me, and I got 3 sons, what I would want is if I had one wish, it's, hey, take care of these kids.
Agreed.
And so we reach out proactively. You saw we just lost that SEAL commander, Brian Bourgeois, and I'm butchering his last name. Bourgeois. So he was at SOCOM he was in the J8, the requirements section. I remember him. I didn't know him that well. I'm not going to pretend I did. But, he left behind 5 kids.
Yeah.
And so we reach out proactively, and those kids will be covered, depending on their ages, but our programs start in preschool. We provide a private school tuition assistance. We provide unlimited tutoring. We pay for their college visits. We run our own college prep course for these kids. We pay for them to attend any college that they want or they get into, right?
Yeah.
So we have one young lady, her dad was a Green Beret, Sarah Weiss. She only wanted to be a firefighter. So she went to a bunch of certification courses, and she's a firefighter in Pinehurst, North Carolina. We had another young man that just graduated from University of Chicago, fully funded. We fund study abroad, we fund internships, and we have a program specifically for children with disabilities. We have about 40 kids in there. And we also help them make the transition to a career. And we call it cradle to career. So the impact of that is, and we do some wounded support, which I'll talk to in just a second, is last year we had 41 kids graduate high school. 38 went straight into post-secondary education, almost all of those into a 4-year institution. 2 joined the military, and 1 took a year off. That same last year, our graduation rate, on-time graduation rate from college was 93%.
Wow.
Both of those numbers, college attendance and college graduation, are over 30% above the national average. And you can consult College Board website and ask it. And when you think about it, these are kids that have lost a parent. Now, we do cover the children of all Medal of Honor recipients, right? Mm-hmm. And they're a small portion of our kids, maybe 40-something out of this 977-something of kids, 970-something. For them to have, go through that traumatic of an event in their life, most of them are in single-parent homes, but to achieve this kind of success and to pursue their dreams, I mean, there's no downside to that. We also provide immediate financial support to severely wounded, injured, or ill. We just sent a 5K check and an iPad off to a 05 in Naval Special Warfare that was going through a catastrophic illness. And of course, we do all services, and to me, it's great. I know a lot of the fathers, and Shannon Kent, the Navy chief that was killed with a suicide bomber, next to 3 others. Her kids are in our program. And so, to me, it's the right thing to do. It's very gratifying. Is it hard work? No. Do I do a lot of travel? Yes. But I love it. I don't plan on going anywhere. I get job offers about, 2 or 3 times a month to go do something else. Not interested. I'm committed.
Is it all funded through donation?
It is, yeah. About, I can't get you the exact percentage, but probably 60% corporate, 40% private donations. SpecialOps.org, it's all in there as our website. Listen, we have to raise money. That's part of it. And we're, obviously that's a big part of my job to do that, but it is for a good cause. We've had a 4-star rating on Charity Navigator, which is a watchdog group over charities. Yeah. For 15 years in a row, we're considered a best practice and in the top 1% of charities supporting the military. So we're good stewards. It's easy for me to go to work every day. I'm not wiggling the sticks on a Black Hawk or, assisting you in your base jumping endeavors. But
there's always tomorrow. We can always change this.
There is.
If we wanted to do this on an extended timeline, you could just fly and I'll just jump.
I would feel much more comfortable with that. But anyway, I'm happy doing it, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
Well, first off, my pleasure for sure. It's I think back again. My perspective on the old portion of my life is so different now than it was in the moment.
Yeah.
One thing that has never changed was the hope or desire or wish that if something did happen to me, And I think back, and maybe it was cavalier. Maybe it was. I don't know the word for it. I cared far less if something were to happen to me. I really worried that I would do something stupid that would cost somebody else their life.
Yeah, me too.
But as long as the people that I left behind were taken care of, I thought more about that than my own any potential risk that I was involved in. And like I said, maybe that's a cavalier approach, but I almost think it's slightly required to be able to perform in those occupations a little bit. So organizations like the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, knowing that exists, when I look back, that helps take the burden off of the modern day operator. I mean, of course, in a perfect world, best case scenario, they go, they do their job, and they come home, and they can move on past their job and become the father, husband, whatever they were missing out on, they can fill in those holes. But in the absence of that, I mean, to have an organization that cares and stays attached and is committed and actually gives a shit about the success of those kids, I mean, I can't think of anything more important and beneficial.
Well, that's the way I feel. And, we're small. We have like 18 people, and a third of them, all they do is work with the kids. I mean, and the parents, and they're with them every step of the way. So it's like, it really is a relationship. I write they'll send me every kid that's getting a good GPA in college or needs encouragement. Mm-hmm. They'll send me a couple of bullet points, and I write them a personal card. It's all about our main effort is making sure those kids reach their full potential. And that's what we're focused on, and that is the most important thing. Yeah, we got to raise money. Yeah, we got to do other stuff. But it's all to make sure that those kids achieve their dreams.
Yeah, those families have given enough.
They have.
Already.
At a level that none of us can really fully understand unless we've been through it.
Yeah, I agree. Looking back on your 41 years, what was your favorite tour of duty?
Favorite job, you mean?
Sure.
Yeah. General McChrystal asked me that when he was promoting me to colonel. And then I said that my favorite job, I remember that. We were in my office, he said, just tell me your favorite job. And I said it was when I was a Marine sergeant. But I would say two, and I would say as a platoon leader in the 160th, the tactical level, I didn't have the impact, obviously, that I did as a general officer, but I loved it. I have my own unit as a sergeant. I have my own unit as a lieutenant, and I felt like, we controlled our destiny to a large extent. I could, you could have direct leadership application and develop capability in the unit. You were in charge of morale. You're in charge of everything.
Yeah.
You're responsible for everything. You may not be in charge of everything, but...
Very important distinction.
Yes, definitely responsible. So I felt like that was probably my most gratifying times, those two times, platoon leader and then as a platoon sergeant.
Yeah, I don't know if there was anything better than just being an E5 SEAL.
That's it, man.
And your job was to be wound up and pointed in a direction and just go eat.
That's exactly well. And there might be some other ancillary tasks: shooting, climbing, swimming, stuff like that.
Yeah,
But at the end of the day, there was always a chow line. Yeah.
No, I mean eat on target.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah. No, I think you got the luxury of focus.
Yeah.
When you're a general officer, you're a generalist, right? Like I said, I was frequency hopping from one topic to another.
Yeah. High level topics too.
Yeah. I mean, you're expected to take it to like a professional sports player, level of going through that door and doing those things that nobody else can do, or flying that aircraft like no one else can do. I mean, being part of a team that collectively, does that better than anyone else on the planet. And like I said, you look back on your time now, I look back on my time now, and I'm like, I just have one word: grateful.
Same.
Yeah, just grateful that I was part of it. I'm a better man for it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade what I had.
I wouldn't either. How was the instance, and this might be anecdotal, but based on what you saw, post-traumatic stress from the pilots, when I first joined the military, I would say, and maybe many would disagree with me, I would say that there was, at the very least, a light stigma associated with it.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, the community really had not been pressure tested.
You're right. Yeah, I agree with all that.
Panama Grenada, very small.
Yep.
Somalia, there was 4 East Coast snipers from the command that were there. So we're talking, 4 out of a community that at that time was like 1,500.
Yeah.
So, it was a lot of your worth in the SEAL community is oftentimes directly associated with your toughness, right? Like the measure of the man is how tough you are. And now later in life, I'm like, well, that's fucking stupid. It goes back to the guys that I know who are literally approaching 20 combat deployments, and they're making decisions that are very difficult, that have a weight and a gravity that will impact you for the rest of your life. And I always tell people, if you touch war, it will touch you back in some way, shape, or form. For me personally, I think it made me a better person. It gave me a better context. I feel like I can love at a deeper level. I feel like I can appreciate at a deeper level. Do I have my own demons that are associated with my time and my experiences? Absolutely, I do.
Yeah.
I think about it every day, most of the time, and it's an incredibly positive experience. And then I have my moments where it's not so great. And it's surprising to me the things that I will relive in my mind, whether I'm sleeping or just daydreaming or whatever it may be. But as I was exiting the military in 2013, they were putting a lot more emphasis on post-traumatic stress, on the family unit. I'm just curious how, flying, for people who think that, just because you're flying a helicopter, it's, it must be easy. You're not dealing with the people from a face-to-face perspective, but the amount of risk and danger that is involved with landing on the X or landing on the Y or doing a CASEVAC and coming into a very hot LZ. I mean, like you said, the first target that we ever did in Iraq in the initial invasion, we came back with like 20 plus bullet holes in the 47. The door gunner got shot in the head.
Oh, I know who that guy is.
He lived.
Yeah, he did. The other guy there was, I remember
lived.
that.
One of our EOD guys just decided not to get off the helicopter. We're like, fuck, our head count's down. Target number 1, we're so good. Yeah. But that was like target 1. I mean, yes, they didn't come with us, there was a gunfight on the ground and there were little birds flying around with snipers that were dumping people. But you're there. You're sharing in the stress. You're sharing in the risk. And I'm curious the impact it had on the aviators, especially with the crazy op tempo.
Yes.
Constantly going back and forth.
Well, it did. So you're right, though. In some ways, when I'm pulling the trigger in an aircraft, I'm looking through a set of nods, and it's certainly not as personal as it is for an operator going through a door and
only though because of distance.
Right.
I mean, it's really all it is.
But, I had this conversation with Alejandro Villanueva, if you know that name. He played for the Steelers. Great guy. I was at a ranch hunting and fishing with him, which Alejandro, when you listen to this, I did win the bass fishing contest, by the way. So I'm going to make sure I send him a link to this just so he heard me say that. But we talked about it, actually, and he said, it is different when you're hearing a guy screaming and moaning that's been shot, whether it's your own guy, it's another level, but even the enemy. And I said, that's absolutely fair. But we still struggled with that, right? With every night going, I mean, it was like working on a GM assembly line or something. I mean, but but they're shooting at you. It's shooting at you, right? And every mission you take off, you're amped up. You need to be. You got to be performing at your highest levels. And I applaud leadership, and the one guy that I can point to that really raised the awareness and did a lot to remove the stigma, and he doesn't even know who I am, but is General Corelli was the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army when all that was going on. And he really took that on, and I think lead turned the entire Department of Defense on that issue, where we have a more mature understanding and recognition of it. And not only that, but TBI, right?
Yeah.
Because you're shooting a 30 millimeter or a 50 cal right next to your head. That overpressure.
Oh yeah.
Blowing demo, whatever it is. We had a crew chief. We had one mission set that we did, and there was going against specific targets. And the lead 60 right door gunner was the guy who always shot. And this particular non-commissioned officer, on one rotation in 45 days, had 79 confirmed kills. 79. And I respected the hell out of him, and he had issues.
Yeah.
And it really, we took him off the line. We put him in a training slot, for a while. And I was proud of the way we dealt with it, and I was the battalion commander at the time. And you just got to recognize it's different. It's different for every person. My wife may, say that PTSD is, why I act like, I act, but I don't feel like I'm sort of like you. I don't really feel it. Maybe I'm in denial. I don't know. But I also know others that struggle with it every day.
Yeah.
And when you see the suicide rates, you got it. It's real. We just brought in we had a family brought into our foundation. He was Navy. He was a fires guy on a reserve SEAL team, but he wasn't a SEAL, right? He was an aviator, and he did 2 or 3 back-to-back rotations with the SEAL team. I don't know if it was Iraq. Or
he probably was acting as the JTAC.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think he was an O, so he might have been the fires guy and the jock. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, he came back from a rotation, and his last rotation, he was at 18 years. And he said, I'm getting out. And his CO and his XO of the SEAL team begged him not to get out. 2 years, they knew he was screwed up, but he got out. And a few months later, he killed himself.
Yeah.
And so, that came to us, and there was no diagnosis because he wouldn't get any treatment, right? So there wasn't any VA service connection or anything. And he left behind 9 kids. And so I heard about this. The CO of that SEAL team wrote us a letter. And I was like, we got to take care of this family. So we put it in front of the board and we voted on it. And that family is covered, all 9 of those kids.
What's crazy about that story too is a good leader who sees that person at 18 years that has already given more and done more than most will ever be asked to do. They're going to find a place to take care of that person, get them the help that they need, get them across that finish line of the 20 years in a better place than they are at that 18 mark. And that's what a good leader would do, right? It's
right.
Like there's other choices than this binary in or out. That's what good leadership can do. They can shepherd people through those difficult times. It's so fucking hard though when people won't say anything.
They won't,
and he won't accept help.
And he wouldn't accept any help.
Yeah.
And those guys were very remorseful, and they went out once this all happened, this unfolded. They came right to us, and I was just so incredibly happy that we were able to help. Right? This widow is living on Social Security. There's no pension. There's no.
It's crazy.
Nothing. And so we've worked with other organizations. I do some pro bono work with the Gary Sinise Foundation. They sent her a check for $25,000 to help her, and so we're rallying the team, to do that, to help them. And my whole point of that story was that individual had a completely different experience, even though they weren't at the same level of combat that we have experienced. But it still affected them, obviously, in a very profound and tragic way. So I think that's the other hard part of PTSD, right? We probably overuse it now. A guy runs a red light and almost hits you. Well, you get people say, I got PTSD for that. Well, maybe you do. Your adrenaline short term, I guess. But that's the hard part about it is it's just different for every person. So I've become very non-judgmental about that. And I do, again, tip my hat to General Corelli for because he changed my thought process, and I know he changed thousands of others because he really cared about it. And he's still involved, I think, as a retiree at some level with some nonprofits that work in that space. So I just think it's something we got to continue to work on. We got to, there's lots of organizations that are standing up new programs, and I think some will be effective and some won't. But it's just as important that we learn that what's not effective as we learn that what's, we build on the success of some programs and cut away from others. So it's tragic, and we just haven't seen it. Now you got to go back. Well, look at World War II and Korea, where these guys in Vietnam. I mean, how much did we miss? Because you're right, we chastised people. We sort of took the Patton approach. If he has this blowout in that tent for this kid that was shell shocked. I think leaders are much better now.
Well, I think we know more about it.
We know more, and we
yeah.
I think you'd be hard pressed to find a leader that doesn't believe PTSD is a real thing.
I don't even think it's an arguable or a debatable point at this stage.
I agree.
And I think what is often lost in the conversation is the after. So I dislike calling it a disorder because I think it's a natural reaction to the stress. And like you said, you can't tell by looking at somebody what their potential stressor may be that will have the long-term impact. But I hope that at some point we can shift to the post-traumatic growth, what can come after. Like I said, I am a very flawed human being. I wish I had been a better husband to my ex-wife. I still consistently wish I could be a better father to my kids. I'm trying to be better in every aspect of my life. But I think my experiences in the military help me in that journey. There is growth that can come from it. You got to walk through the fire to get there. I mean, I have spoken to counselors throughout my life, post leaving the military for the last 3 years. Now it's every other Wednesday just for scheduling, but there's a reason for that. And I think that hopefully the messaging, what I hate is the broken toy narrative of veterans, because it is a term that gets thrown out. It's an easy one.
Misused.
It gets used, and people won't push back on it. And I understand that, but that also, and whether or not people want to hear this, I really don't care. There are people that will use it to their benefit who have no reason to. And the more we can get away from this broken toy narrative and focus on the growth that can come from post-traumatic stress, I think the better off that the military community will be as a whole. I don't know how to lay the bricks on that path or where the road will lead to, but that growth aspect I think is huge.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's so dynamic and so inconsistent among individuals that's why if it was an easy problem, we would have solved it already.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And so I just think we continue to grow, and you got to have empathy. The first critical step is that individuals are okay with saying, hey, this is an overused term and I hate it. It's okay not to be okay. But I mean, that's really it, right? Yeah. It is being able to say, hey, look, I'm struggling here, My wife and I last weekend went and saw this movie Dog, which is about this canine, a working canine that was in 2nd Ranger Battalion, and the canine handler gets killed. And I think it's Tanning. Yeah. Tatum.
Now you got making Channing Tatum.
Yeah, one of those two. It's either first or last name. It's, but
he was in Magic Mike.
That's the guy. Yeah. My wife reminds me of that all the time.
I'm sure she watched that movie for the plot.
I'm sure, yeah, she did.
Yeah, storyline and
plot. It was
plot.
fairly deep, yeah, I'm sure. But it does a great job of sort of capturing the culture of the Rangers and this PTSD this guy's struggling with. And I thought it was a really good movie, right? My wife still won't let me get a Belgian Malinois, which I asked on the way out. Nope, no dog for you. But
some things are best just brought home without asking for permission and then asking for forgiveness. So
if I did that and it didn't work out quite the way I thought, so you're good with me having an extended sleepover at your house?
That works. Bring a Blackhawk.
Well, I'm fresh out of Blackhawks, yeah. No, but I thought it was good. I thought it raised awareness. I thought it was very well done. So I think we got to keep doing things. Gary Sinise Foundation, and look, Gary has been there for my guys, I got one of my AH-6 pilots, broke his back. He built him a house outside of Clarksville. I mean, mortgage free. But he's now taken on PTSD, and he's like doing an umbrella thing where he brings in these other organizations, you know, gets best practices and farms these folks out to these different treatment based on their personal circumstances. So he's taken it on. And, you know, that's not our mission. Our mission is obviously very focused on education, but I applaud it. And I do think that efforts like his and his organization are going to, you know, I don't know that we'll ever solve it, but I think we'll achieve some success.
The multi-tiered approach is the best one when it comes to that, for sure.
You're right. And I think you won't find anybody in this space that says cookie cutter approaches do not work.
Agreed. Where can people, what's the best route for them to support the Special Operations Warrior Foundation?
So I'd invite you to go to specialops.org and look at that. Everything's on there. Our financials are on there. Our programs are on there. Ways to give are on there. Look at our board and our ambassadors. It's sort of the who's who of special ops in there. You know, we got a lot of, you know, great legendary special operators serving on the board and some significant corporate folks on there. If you watch Yellowstone,
yep,
Cole Hauser, Rip, is on our board.
People get upset with me for posting pictures of Montana, and they'll be like, "You're ruining it." And I would say to them, "Do you make these same complaints to the producers of Yellowstone?" That has a reach that it far exceeds my Instagram page. Like, get out of here with this.
Yeah, no, he just joined our board. He's a great dude, man. I really like hanging out with him. Him and his family spent a weekend with us a couple of months ago, and we're a very mature organization. April 24th will be our 42nd anniversary. You know, we started in the aftermath of Desert One when we lost 8 Americans, you know, at a refueling site, trying to go in to rescue 52 Americans in Tehran.
The birth of JSOC.
Right. 3 Marines, 5 airmen, left behind 17 kids. The other members of that task force made a commitment to fund the education of those 17 kids almost 42 years ago, and the mission continues.
And it's going to continue far into the future, I believe.
It will.
Personal assessment.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. We've already added several kids to our roles because it's line of duty death. It's not just combat.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, bourgeois.
Yeah. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
If you ask me to spell that with a gun to my head, I'm in trouble.
Well, yeah, you and me both. I think it's going to be a murder. It's going to be a serial killer with us on this. But I mean, his kids are in our program and several others already this year. So the mission continues, and we're gonna be there for him from the cradle to the career. And like I said, it's righteous.
It's a noble cause for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you for taking the time and coming to tell me about it. I really appreciate you traveling up here.
No, hey, listen, I appreciate the opportunity. I've been looking forward to meeting you, and I appreciate the discussion on PTSD and everything else, and all the love you threw on the 160th guys.
They're awesome.
Well,
awesome.
I know. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right,
Clay.
bro. See ya.